It's the end of the year. It's December the 22nd, and we thought we'd take the opportunity to do a quick review of 2020. Trying to avoid all the cliches about what a bad year it was. I'm sure you all know that. But just to remind you what went on. In January, way back in January, the beginning of January, the actual EU withdrawal bill was announced. But at the end of January, we did actually leave the EU, believe it or not. Of course, it's been talked about ever since. We're going back to actual property matters. On the 13th, legislation was brought in to make electrical certificates mandatory. It was announced that the local housing allowance is to rise in line with inflation, and it was shown that rentals were showing some small rise for new lets. There's a new bill published which was suggesting to get rid of ASTs. That has died a death at the moment. It's still technically there, but not really getting anywhere. And then the Law Society came along and they also supported the abolition of Section 21. At the end of January, the house prices were showing a small rise. February, there was a report that came out that said, surprise, surprise, the local housing allowance was too low to live on. We then got the first reports of coronavirus, and there was an article came out on how it might affect landlords. There was an ONS, the Office of National Statistics report, stated that younger people are more likely to rent than to buy. And then there was a bill published by Christopher Cope, which was suggesting that it should make subletting illegal. That's also parked at the moment. Upon questioning, the Minister announced that the rogues database that has been out for some while only had 18 people on it. Then the Minister, Esther McVey, was replaced with Christopher Pincher, so in the middle of that year in a big reshuffle. First reports from the Financial Times that smaller landlords were selling up. And then 21st of February, we got the first positive COVID case in the United Kingdom. A few days afterwards, BBC report says we're in the middle of a housing crisis. Again, no great surprise there. But Arlo says that tenant demands reached a new record high, or reaching a new record high. The courts agreed at the end of February that DSS adverts were discriminatory. You weren't allowed to do them. March, we started to get some more coming out about COVID. We've got guidelines for the rough sleepers, which has been extremely successful. We had the first settlement for Brexit that was published. Then on the 18th, we got the first COVID ban on evictions. FCA set out their guidelines for taking a mortgage holiday. The LHA rate local housing allowance rate was increased. And it's worth remembering on the 22nd that COVID cases reached 1,400 per day. It's now, at the end of December, it's just dropped down from 30,000. So that's to put it in context. 23rd, as we all, I'm sure, remember, we got the first national lockdown. And we started getting some support for businesses being announced. Section 8 and Section 21 became a 3-month notice. Courts were given for new rules. And the government issued new guidance for landlords and tenants. At the end of March, they did change the right to rent checks so that you didn't have to do them face to face, and you could do them over a video link. But they since announced that if you did do it over a video link, you now need to do it face to face. So that's caused a bit of consternation. Airbnb decided they're going to block all bookings in the UK at the beginning of April. Government make a couple of launches. They launched an online business support hub. Then they support an online claim for COVID. Middle of April, we get business rate relief announced. Also, to show that life's continuing as normal, there's a report on new permitted development rights. That was published. And one of the things that was put in that was the allowance to go upwards rather than outwards. Brighton, one of the first local authorities to announce a limit on new student lets. This is with planning. The housing minister states that you're still allowed to do rent increases during the lockdown, etc. but there was a report that showed that more tenancies were being renewed. End of April, we get the bounce back loan and the self-employment income support schemes. DWP announced that they're suspending universal credit arrear deductions, and then at the very end of April we get small business grants announced. Then short time afterwards, there's a big fund for to help the high street. The housing minister starts drafting plans to allow agents back to work in the beginning of May. And the land registry come into the 21st century and start to relax their signing rules and actually talking about allowing electronic signatures, which they now allow. Same time, Boswell's restart their rent guarantee insurance. So if you haven't got it, look at that. There's some rumours in the beginning of May that tenants will be safe from eviction, and sure enough, on the 11th, there's a stay that came in on all eviction proceedings. But on the 13th, it's announced that people will be allowed to move home. On the 20th, a lot of universities announced that they were sending their students, or they were no longer allowing their students into the universities and colleges. They all will go online for the rest of that academic year, which is only a couple of months. The FCA announced protection for mortgagors. If you've got a mortgage, there's protection there. And there's an announcement to the amendments to Part B of building regs, which is fire risk. On June the 1st, it became mandatory for electrical certificates. That's for all new lets. From April the 1st next year, it will be mandatory for all properties. The government update their guidance for landlords. Some universities start to announce that they're thinking for the next academic year they will remain online. That's all over the place at the moment. And then we get this eviction ban extended to August the 23rd. Interesting enough, we had something which went landlords' way, which is a few years ago, an appeal judge said that if you'd issued the CP12, the gas inspection report, and you'd been served on the tenant after they'd occupied the property, you couldn't use the Section 21. The appeal court said under certain circumstances that late service would be allowed. So you need to look at that. Barclays were the first one to stop loans to limited companies, and the Times put out an article warning of the dangers of using the bounce back loan, you can't even say it, to buy properties. That's what it was not intended for. Government announced that the rent repayment orders, the potential for them was to be increased. The government then announced that the eviction ban would finish on August 24th. That was the announcement then. The property ombudsman warns about if you're using video viewings, make sure they're true and proper, and you're not hiding something, because that's all tenants could go on at the time. Shelter started their scaremongering, saying there's going to be 250,000 people being evicted when the eviction ban resumes. In an attempt to restart the house market, stamp duty was reduced for 6 months from July the 8th. That seems to have worked. Then we got this peculiar thing about that the rental market inside London was basically dying, but outside it was being quite healthy. Unfortunately, on the 17th, Lord Best published a report where he calls for rent caps. That at the moment hasn't gone anywhere. The Inland Revenue popped up on the 22nd to confirm that making tax digital will still happen. Then the Lib Dems weighed in to say they think the Section 21 should be scrapped, so they keep on about that. End of July, David Cox left Arla, and they're now looking for a new CEO. And the very end of July, the Help to Buy scheme was extended. August, as Land Registry finally allow electronic submissions, so they really have come up to scratching that one. The fourth temporary Nightingale courts were opened, but they weren't really very helpful for eviction cases. Then suddenly, beginning of August, there's a late surge in students looking for accommodation in the academic year. It's just started. Got a white paper on community infrastructure levy and Section 106s. The Green Homes Grant was updated. Have a look at that. But then it was announced that the EU right to rent checks was postponed until June 2021. So if you're taking in an EU citizen, you can carry on doing it as though they've got the permanent right to remain until June 2021. There will be another announcement then. We wait to see. A bit more announcements, a bit more guidance on how you can build on top of buildings already in place. The 12th, the eviction ban was extended in Scotland, and then the 21st, jumping down, that was extended in England to September the 30th. Also, although we were told that August the 24th it would be finishing, it wasn't. TSB announced that they won't lend on any properties having a poor EPC rating, particularly having less than less than D. So an F or G they won't be allowed to loan on those. And then at the end of the month, we got the glorious news that the Section 8 and Section 21 would become a 6-month notice. On the 14th, there was another court case about DSS adverts, no DSS, deemed to be illegal again. If you use a Section 21, then want to go to accelerated court, or accelerated proceedings, you have to fill out a new N5B. The new one came out on the 14th, and it's enormous. It used to be 3 or 4 pages long. It's now 20. And take note, everyone, that one of the things that came out then, which no one had realised before, was that you had to have all the gas inspection reports, the CP12, for the whole of that tenancy. So if you've been letting to the same tenant for the last 10 years, you needed the last 10 years worth of gas inspections. That's caught a lot of people out, so start keeping those. Then we got confirmation that courts would reopen, but that you would have to do a reactivation form for any old cases which have been raised. So have a look at that. London students started to trickle back in the middle of the year. We were told there were going to be 200 extra judges to help with the Nightingale courts, but we haven't really seen those. And then the London Mayor weighs in, calling for a 2-year rent freeze. There's a bill brought out to try and quote improve substandard HMOs. Again, that's died a bit of a death at the moment. But then bailiffs were advised not to evict tenants over December the 11th to January the 11th. That's since been changed into from advice to actual instruction. House of Commons issue the ultimate guide to evictions. Have a look at that. And then there was a review of the Homelessness Reduction Act. In October, there was the suggestion that we should not be allowed to advertise a non-EPC compliant property. So whatever the rules were at the time, if it's an F or a G rating, you can't advertise, or you shouldn't be allowed to advertise it. House prices continue to rise. In fact, hit a 4-year high, but there's a report which says that 65% of landlords have been affected financially by the pandemic. The Bank of England start to consider negative interest rates. Will be very interesting. Middle of the year, there's all the COVID assistance was extended, but as a report came out, it said if you've got cash, you're the king at the moment in the current climate. John Lewis then decided they're going to look at building rental homes on any land that they own. But a report came out which pointed out the unintended consequences of getting rid of the Section 21. So have a look at that as well. Another report came out and said instead of keep going on about rogue landlords, please give support to good landlords. So it's nice to see. But also there was a claim that national licensing was probably on the horizon. November was particularly busy. I've had to go on to 2 screens for this one. The furlough and mortgage schemes were extended. We saw there's a report that came out on the 2nd that saw a rise in the number of landlords selling. But then on the 9th, we got another report that says that there's an increase in the number of landlords buying. So you pay your money and takes your choice on that one. There's a warning that rent arrears could triple in the next 12 months. I would just make a comment there that a lot of questions on the helpline, people are saying they can't evict tenants. Yes, you can start the process to evict tenants. It's just very often the courts are closed, you can't finish it off. but there's nothing stopping you issuing a money claim online if a tenant owes you rent arrears. So consider that. There is a report also that urged landlords to adapt to changing requirements, and later on you'll see that in general they seem to have done. We were at the National Landlord Investment Show and gave a talk, so have a look at that. And then the day after, the second national lockdown started. The government then issued a new right to rent guide. There was a suggestion that COVID might end purpose-built student accommodation. This is specifically in Coventry, but it was suggesting this might be the case in other parts of the country as well. And then we got, as I said, the courts were instructed to close from December 11th to January 11th. There was a report about underinsurance being a big problem, and also another one saying that because of COVID, because of a lot of tenants didn't like the fact that they were sharing with other people, there was a report which said that HMOs were starting to be affected by it. There was a suggestion, nobody knows where this came from, that capital gains tax could double. Now, in the autumn statement on the 25th, there was no mention of that, but there may be something in the budget in next March. Then we got a contrary report which said landlords are staying one step ahead. So, we hope that they are. Followed up very quickly by Rick's issuing one of their regular reports to say that COVID hasn't really dented sales or rentals, so that's good. The government came out with some advice to say any flats in the blocks without cladding will no longer require an EWS1 form. The only thing I would comment there is that apparently if you're buying on a mortgage companies are insisting on all blocks, no matter how small, how new, whatever, that they will require an EWS form. And the government are trying to get their head around that one to try and kickstart flats without cladding being affected. NatWest stopped loans to those getting COVID grants, and then the LH rate, having gone up for the beginning of the year, was then frozen at the end. But then a brand new refurbishment mortgage was announced, so which could help the housing market as well. And then coming right up to date in December, there was a Commons report which had looked at the fire safety bill, which is following the Grenfell fire, and they're saying in its current format it's just inadequate. So that may go back to be looked at again. There was a claim that licensing risks giving vulnerable people COVID. Also, there's another report which said that a quarter of landlords and agents don't know what client money protection is. And it's a bit worrying. They said some agents didn't know what client money protection is. So that's very worrying. Surprise, surprise, we get a report out which says that possession claims are well down by nearly 90%. Well, the courts were closed most of that time, so it's going to be the case, isn't it? Another report says, or an article actually in the newspaper, why don't you consider more rooftop extensions? So I think it's going to be the big thing for next year. And then on the 10th, we got a new how to rent guide issued. So please make sure that when you serve it on any potential new occupiers from December the 10th, that you use the new version. And then we get a report to say Christmas is going to be hard. There'll probably be more arrears. Again, self-evident, I would suggest. Government were asked whether they're going to extend the stamp duty holiday, and they came back with no, they won't. But as we all know, things have changed. And then Generation Rent decided to wade in by calling for the government to write off all the rent arrears. Not entirely certain where they think this money is going to come from, because the Treasurer have been dishing out money left, right and centre. So, it'd be nice for everybody, especially the tenants, if they could write off the rent arrears, but I suspect it's not going to happen. And then finally, as at yesterday, there was an extra grant of £47 million for all councils to help with homelessness. So that was the year that was. So will next year be better? Well, who knows? The positive things are that the vaccine will become more and more available. So we hope that numbers will start to drive down next year. So life might start to return to normal. But then we've got the unknown of Brexit. So we wait to see. But the key seems to be flexibility. And really, 2020 has shown that you need to remain flexible and just, keep amending your business model. Just because you've got a business model that's worked for the last 12 years, that's absolutely no guarantee it will work for the next 12 months. So especially student accommodation. Our meetup in February, we'll be discussing student landlords and how have they got a plan B, and could they look at renting something else. So our message basically is keep safe, keep well, keep flexible, and keep your membership of iHowz up. Happy Christmas and a successful new year, and we'll see you in the new year.